Hi guys, welcome back to Otto's Garage. So doing a couple of little jobs and finally got around to actually bonding in those Bonnet grills that we looked at last time. And this is what she looks like. So you can kind of see straight the way through them, but they've gone in really nicely. And what I've used is a clear adhesive. Product it's called CT1, quite common in the building trade. It's a little bit like silicone, but it actually sets quite hard, and you can paint over it, although in this instance we're not going to do that, obviously. But it's great because with being clear, it's kind of just seamless. You know, you really cannot see where the bonding has occurred on it. That's great. Like I said, let me just shut that down. I've done it in such a way that you can see through, but then from the front they kind of close over and you can't see any openings in there at all, which is great. So it's going to pull all that air out, which is what we were after. Yeah, so that's the effect I was looking for anyway. Very pleased. Kaboosh! And inside that bonnet, there's also a bit of work being going on there. So basically, what we have achieved is a few things. A lot more pipes have gone in. Got a couple of extra clamps for the air filter and down by the turbo down there. We've put the correct pipes into the wastegate actuator controller, and got a couple of clips in there on that. This is the sensor for the fan, so that's going to trigger the fan when we get up to temperature. We've also mounted our 40 amp trip switch there, which is the power supply down to the Motor Gadget Blue. We've still got to wire that up. And then over on the other side there, we've got the manifold pressure sensor. So that's the standard pressure switch that goes on the Weber injection unit, and I've just made up a little bracket and kind of welded that over onto our crossbar, which is proving immensely useful. I'm glad I put that in there. It just means that we can get lots of little brackets and things like that on. If I'd used a one of them bolt-in removable ones, then that would have created a few issues really. So that's all cool. And I think the next job I'm going to try and do is do some work on the electrics and the dash, and then when my assistant Jemima, my daughter, comes back, she can give me a hand on getting some of these last bits of hoses connected up, like these ones here and stuff like that. We've had a load more hoses arrive, so that's a little job there which can be cracked on with. Right, we're fitting some of these hose clips, and this is the kind of problem that you can get. On the turbocharger, there's obviously a hose coming off there towards the intercooler, and the hose clip on there needed to be a certain size. When we've loosened it off a bit, this has occurred basically. So that's the turbo, that would be where the hose clip is, but we've lost a part off the hose clip and we couldn't find it on the floor, so we've got the little camera, had a look down it, and what you can see is that little thing there. That is the part off the hose clip, that was cylinder, and that means that if we run it like that, terminal. So we're going to have to take the edge off the turbo, the housing, to get at that and remove it. These things happen, and the best thing to do is just own up to it at the time rather than thinking, we'll just chuck another one on instead. So we had a good hunt round on the floor. We couldn't find it anywhere, and we thought it must have gone down the turbo housing. So we'll whip that off and we'll find it inside. So Jemima managed to get that turbo apart there, and we did indeed find this little doohickey down inside the compressor housing. So we managed to flick that out anyway. But the camera was a godsend. At least it confirmed what we thought before we had to strip it all down. Quite straightforward to get it off, but anyway, we've done that. I'm going to take this center console out now, and then I'm going to mount up some of the gauges that we've got on some of the switch gear in there. And then when they're in, we can then drop her back down again and see what we need to connect up behind it, basically. I've been wiring up some of those switches and connections in the back of the console. So we'll have a quick look and just see what's been going on there. So basically, we've got the water gauge and the oil temperature gauge. This is the back of the bias knob, and then there's a variety of switches down there, which are things like the push button for the starter, the live feed for ignition, and the pumps, etc. That's the back of the master FIA cutout switch. So you've got a couple of connections you've got to run around, and there's a ballast resistor which goes down to earth to stop any kind of just takes a slack up when you knock the power off rather than something shorting quickly. Bit like if you imagine an electrical spring. And then over here we've got the cigarette lighter with a light feeding it, some earths, and then what I've done is I've connected a whole load of little push spade connections down here so that we can take the whole console out and work on any of those items away from the car rather than having to reach up around the back like you used to do back in the 80s when you're putting your car stereo in. You'd end up having your arse on the seat and your head down the footwell looking at where all the connections go. So hopefully that's going to get around all that. We've got in effect a module that we can plug in and plug out. The other thing that I've been doing is this is the up and down switch, which typically would be used for electric windows, but in this instance we're going to wire it into the fan, and it's basically a changeover switch. So you've got one motor on the this is the fan distribution, I should say, not the fan itself, but it basically pushes the air up to demist or down to your feet, and this is just a momentary rocker switch. In simplest form, it's just a changeover. So basically you click it one way, positive and minus go to the motor on one side, click it the other way, it flicks it around. So it basically puts the motor backwards and forwards, and that will adjust the output of where the air is going after it's come out of the heater matrix. So what I'm going to do now is mount that up in the switch position. That's on the little plate that we had before. So this had the rotary knobs on it for the fan control and the heater control. So I'm going to mount that. I need to cut that so I can get that in up here somewhere, and then we can mount the whole of that unit back into the car and get the heater connected up, and then the console can go in underneath it afterwards. Well, that's that switch panel out again, and now we have got ourselves a foot stroke demist switchy thingy jobby in there. I found drilling that out and then filing it square or into a rectangle was the best way of doing that. And on the back side you can see the connections there. So what I've got to do now is determine where the connections go for the 3-speed fan switch, and also the little cable that connects onto this cam, which basically opens and closes the water valve to give heat to the system as well. But yeah, I'll get those ones done on the back of there, and then we can get that put back into the dash binnacle on the top. Well, we are getting there now. That's the heater control panel in, and they're all connected up under there. I've also been down and fitted all of the terminals on the wires which go to the rear of that console control panel. The only one that I haven't got in at the moment is there's an earth there which I need to sort out. This is the feed for the fan module, and this is the orange one is the feed for the ECU. Neither of which are in situation at the moment, so I can pull those through around the back afterwards anyway. So I think I am going to try and drop the center console in and just see if all of that is going to meet up with what we've actually done on the bench. Well, I tell you what, that has taken a bit of work, and we have finally got the center console in its final resting place. And there she is. So, well, it speaks for itself really, doesn't it? It's a good job, and it's in basically. So what I need to do next is just sort out this instrument binnacle at the top here, but I can't do that. I'm still waiting for that bloody gauge to come. It's probably coming from the other side of China. Been here and back twice, no doubt. But anyway, I liking all that. That's all good, and we have obviously still got to sort out the actual cable cut off for that, which is going to have to come up here somewhere. And then I've just got to basically go around the back and make all the various connections, which should be quite straightforward, because obviously we've got a little bit of play with our wires in there, and then we'll just tidy up some of this, get some trunking on it or something like that. But apart from that, she's good, she's in, and she's looking very good. It might seem strange, but I very rarely sit in the car. You know, you make these things and you just keep plugging away at it. But I thought, having had that console in, I'd better just have a bit of a sit down and just see what I can do with regard to reaching control. So this is the kind of driver's eye view that you've got, and you can see that we can reach all of those knobs and buttons and dials and gauges nicely. I haven't got the gear lever in yet, obviously, in the handbrake, but it does give you a good idea of just exactly what it's going to be like. So it is quite nice to just have a bit of a sit in it every now and then. The other thing I do like, on the Prisma dash, you get this handy shelf which goes all the way across, so that is going to be great for piling loads of shit on, like sandwiches and old coffee cups and McDonald's and all that sort of crap during the day. Happy days. Okay, someone's just asked for a quick update on what all these switches do. So basically up the top here we've got the heater control, that's hot and cold, demist and down onto your feet, so that just blows the air up or down. 3-speed fan for the blower, so that's all the heating controls up there. Obviously there's a couple of vents there which are factory fit. Down on the center console, brake bias, oil temperature, that's an LED gauge, water temperature LED as well. Obviously this is the master FIA cut-off switch, the start stop button, and then over here we've got ignition and then pumps, so that's for all the power steering, the fuel and the electric water pump, etc. And then underneath it we've got a horn, and we've also got here the dipped lights, that's the main lights coming on, and then alongside that is the fog light. I've got a couple of other switches on that side that I'll need to put in. One of them will be to control the headlamps in the lamp pod at the front. I'm not sure about the other one. On the side round there we've got the socket for the cigarette lighter or the 12-volt accessory. Indicator stalks will be up in their original position here on the steering column, and also the wiper control will be up there as well, and the main dip beam for the lights, but that's original stalks on there. So that is basically it in a nutshell. Moving on to do some of the main electrical connections. So this is basically, I'm now looking at the battery leads, which are going obviously from the battery up to the FIA master switch, and then onto this little doohickey that I've picked up. So this is where the bus bar is going to go. I'm going to mount that down there on that little shelf, and then we can have the main feeds coming into it and also going out of it down to the alternator and down to the starter motor. Now that bus bar is good for, I think it's 160 amps, so we're not going to have any issue with what the current is pulling through that at all, which is good news. We don't want it to melt. So that's the bus bar fitted, and you can see the main feed coming in there from the back, and that comes directly off the FIA master switch. So we've got a few connections to make on there once we've got the starter motor in, which currently, as you can see, is missing, and then just down to the alternator on this side. So that's quite straightforward. The other thing that I do need to run off that is this little lead from the power steering pump. So I've just got to extend that basically to get that around. We can route that around the top and then get that up into the bus bar as well, which is cool. So that's all coming together nicely. We've been having a bit of a play with more hoses, and in particular our good friend under here that we call the hose from hell. That's the breather off the crankcase basically, and that snakes around right the way underneath there and gets up into the underside of the throttle body coming up here, the blue one there with the double clips on it. What a pig that is to put in there. But in any event, we've got that done, and I think most of the tricky ones are in there now, but it is a little bit like Spaghetti Junction with all these hoses now, which is good news because hopefully that means it's all going to work. Time will tell. Quick look at the power steering pump wiring now. So the original cables straight off the Astra, you got this brown one which is the earth, and the red one which is the feed. What I'm going to do, I've run a new cable all the way around and back to our good old friendly bus bar back there. So that cable there now is going to be live as soon as the master switch is flicked on, but however I don't really want that coming live here all the time, so we're going to need or I should say I do want it live all the time, but what I do need is some protection for the pump in case it decides to go nuts and pull loads of power off it. So I'm going to put a fuse in here. I'll probably fix that up against this side panel here. So we've got that one loose, the fuse is on the way, I've cut that one off ready to go, so when the fuse comes, can mount that up and do the end of these terminals here. On the negative side of things, I'm going to run that down. There's quite a nice little chassis hole here which I've just tapped out to get a nice clean thread, and then we're going to put a nice new bolt into that and then trim this down, and this basically can be our earth down the bottom there. This lead here is not used. I have been over this before in another video, and also this is actually the 12-volt supply to the pump, so that's just like a trickle, and there's clearly some kind of relay mechanism in here which when you put the trickle 12-volt supply to it, it fires up the relay and then draws on this main cable basically, which is the main amp supply to our good friend the pump. So that's all crystal clear. I'm going to get that earthed on down there, and then when that's done I'll show you the fuse when that's all arrived. And there it is. So that's got a nice connection there straight onto the chassis rail, which is what you need. And the other thing I'm going to say is that when you've got heavy duty feeds like that to that pump, you need also to have a heavy duty earth as well. There's no point having a thin earth because it'll probably just burn it out. So keep those gauge wires pretty much the same on the earth as they are on the live feeds to those various items. Water pump wiring. So this is basically what we've got. This is our BMW water pump, and these are all of the little connectors, etc. That's the controller. This connector with all these wires on, that is really tiny. I'll just show you that. That is basically it, and you can see by my thumb the size of that. I took that to an electrical contractor, BSB Sound Engineering, thank you very much, and they basically made up that fly lead for me. So what I can now do is connect up to these little cables here and in effect make them bigger so that I can then connect them into the normal terminal, blocks, whichever. So what I've done at the moment is I've got the relay in this. You have to have a relay on it because it sends out a little signal, very fine wire signal, which trips the relay and that fires off down to the fan. It's got a temperature sensor. I'm going to use the actual temperature sensor on the Lancia head the one that goes back to the temperature gauge. Basically, I'm going to try it with that one. And then we've also got the battery kind of permanent feed, which goes through my fused outlet off the Motor Gadget Blue. So when I flick the pumps on, that one will come to that. And then there's the switch one will come to that, and then there's the permanent one which comes off the back of the FIA switch, the master switch. That's all cool, that's straightforward enough. And then this doohickey down here is a monster fuse, which basically protects the main feed going to ultimately the pump, and that is this little puppy here. So basically what we've got is a kind of fuse carrier. I've made up a couple of leads, so this one is going to come off the back of the FIA switch, and then that one will go to the pump, which isn't too far away from it. It's under that passenger footwell. So I've just made up these, crimped these ones on, and also got some heat shrink around it, so now I can slide those into there and the fuse can go in that end of it. Bobby job. And that's what it looks like with the fuse in. So it all just kind of clicks in really, quite straightforward. And if you do need to get it apart, you can just like unpop these yellow lugs on the side and the whole thing will just fall to bits. So that's basically got a 40 amp in it. And what I've now got to do is have a look and see on the pump, the existing pump that I've got, slightly different shape connection block, but basically the same. Basically I think I've got to just pull that off and then connect some wires to it, one of which will come back to the fuse inlet for it. I've made up that lead now, and what I've decided to do is mount the unit. Let me just get in here. So you remember this was the controller for the water pump, and we had a little hole in the dash from before which had that kind of breather pipe which measured the cabin temperature for the heater, which is now redundant. What I've done is I've fed through that cable that I've made up, and that's kind of like the bird's nest of wires that we need for the controller. There's 8 wires off it. Anyway, I fed that through there, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount this basically over that hole, so that will give us a nice neat solution to a factory hole, but also it means that I can monitor the what's going on with the water pump, because basically this has got a row of LEDs on it, and it kind of gives you a signal as to how you've got the pump set up and whether it's working, etc. So that might be a bit of useful information, but as much as anything, it keeps it up there out of the way, and it's not going to get bashed or knocked, by somebody kicking it in the footwell or something like that. So that's the plan. Watch this space. And there she is. Now I haven't actually fixed it on yet, but it is in its kind of final position, if you like. It just needs a bit of, I think probably some sticky pad behind it, something like that. So that's quite neat. I'm liking that a lot. I like quite a lot of things, don't I? Happy days. I'm just having a look at the hoses where they go through the bulkhead. You can see here we've basically got quite a hole that we've had to get so that the hose clears, but I've got to seal that up. And what I'm going to do is make a rubber pad that goes round that with a hole in the middle of it, which can be bonded back onto the top of the bulkhead there basically. So we'll have a look and see the method that we're going to employ. What I've got here is some, I think it's 3 or 4 mil, it's 3 mil rubber sheet, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out a square big enough to go over that hole, and then some as well, and then we'll make a hole in the middle of it, slide it over the hose, and then basically it can be bonded back down onto the top of the bulkhead. I've just trimmed that out, so basically I've got a patch big enough to cover the hole, and obviously leave it enough clearance so that it can be bonded back down as well. And I've just trimmed that with a Stanley knife, and use a rule. Don't just start pulling the bloody knife around, because it'll just probably end up cutting your finger off or something like And I've got quite a good surface here. This is a bit of old kitchen worktop, like this resin stone stuff. It's great for cutting against. Anyway, I digress. What we're going to do now is visit our good old friend, the 10-ton press, and I'm going to show you what exactly we're going to do on that. Right, so here's the pad, and what we're going to use is, it's an old bearing, I think it is, a bearing casing, or a bush, something like that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to punch a hole right through the middle of it, utilising the press. So basically, if we get that on a hard metal plate, and we're going to get this set up pretty much in the middle. And about there is good. And then what we're going to do is press down. It should, well it will, I know it's going to because it's got 10 tons of pressure behind it. And I'll punch a hole neatly through it to the extent that we can just pull it off like that. And presto, there's our hole. Now the great thing with doing this is you could cut it with a Stanley knife, but you'll probably find then that it'll introduce a weakness, you know, where you miss, because you'll never cut it perfectly. So that's a great way of doing it, and it kind of makes it like factory as well. We'll go and offer it up on the cart and see what she looks like. Okay, so here's our piece of rubber. That's the hose that we're trying to get over, and basically you can just feed that over there like that. You need to cut that hole slightly smaller than the tube, and then you'll end up with a nice factory fit as it goes round it. So what I've got to do now is get that round the corner, and I think it's got to go kind of somewhere here, because when we put that through, it'll be fitted down onto the water pump, and then basically the rubber gasket will pull down onto the bodywork, and we can bond that on in a bit. And there it is, fitted. So the only thing I need to do now really is, when we've tested all the water leaks and everything, we'll bond this back down onto the firewall there. But they do look great, and it kind of tidies up where those holes were and stops the pipes from moving about as well. All good. Four years ago to the day, the Lancia arrived at the workshop, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do to it at that stage. I thought it was just going to be tarted up and probably put back on the road. But in any event, I thought it would probably be a good idea, as it's his 4th anniversary, to get it outside and just show you what she looks like now. Well, thanks for watching that episode of Otto's Garage. I hope you've enjoyed that update on it, and it's great to see the car out with a bit of livery on it on its 4th birthday. Still a fair bit to go, but the list is getting shorter, and I'm just going to hopefully get those clocks. I've been told that they are due for delivery anytime. We can get those onto the dashboard and then hopefully get some of that internal wire work complete. So with that, thanks for watching Otto's Garage. I'll catch you on the next episode. Stay safe. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye!